Welcome to your 20-minute attorney business development podcast. We recognize that you're short on time, managing your practice, doing business development, and managing your life. So this podcast is designed to be listened to when you're commuting to and from work, or going for a walk, or doing almost anything except work. My co-host is Tobias Steinman. Tobi is a Swiss qualified lawyer turned legal marketing expert. After practicing in a commercial law firm, Tobi did an MBA and he never went back. Today, he co-owns a marketing and branding agency focused on firms in the legal sector.
Thank you very much, Bill. If you guys don't know Bill Burns yet, you are in luck because he's definitely a person to know in the field of business development in the legal sector. In fact, he's a business development executive for a full-service US-based law firm called Porter, Wright, Morris & Arthur. He's a former journalist, PR executive and lobbyist who has spent the last several decades advising attorneys just like yourselves at every stage of their business development. So, Bill, you and I, we decided to start a podcast. We are doing this not just because we think the world needs another podcast, but because we very much enjoyed our conversations. In fact, we only met this summer during a lawyers' conference in Washington.
Well, we got to know each other a little bit in the prep calls, but we met in person for the first time in D.C., and I must have said some good things because you turned to me after our session and said, hey, do you want to do a podcast?
So for now, we have planned a first season for this podcast with 9 episodes, after which the audience will be the judge of whether there will be a second season to this one. This podcast, actually everyone is welcome. So whether you work in a big firm, in a small partnership, or as an independent lawyer, we aim to discuss the topics that will help you to become more successful in business development and by that also gain more independence for your legal career. For this first episode, we chose a topic that is at the very core of the success for legal business development. So the skills that you need to build successful business relationship. Why are these skills so crucial for lawyers?
Well, Tobi, business development in the legal sector is dramatically different from selling soap or shoes or any commodity. But unfortunately, too many attorneys focus only on the marketing side, the traditional sales approach to business development, the self-promotion, and then they wonder why they struggle with getting clients.
You and I actually, in the build-up of this podcast, in the preparation, we had quite a debate on what is marketing and what is business development, and this debate has not finished, and we're not going to open this can of worms now because it's basically something that is a whole episode of itself. But I think what we fundamentally agreed on is that this whole me-oriented communication does not get us anywhere in business development because it doesn't really add any value to the client.
That's absolutely true, And the whole point is understanding what the client or the prospect wants or needs, and then finding a way to align what you can offer with those wants or needs. I don't know how many times I've talked to attorneys who are frustrated because they say, well, I took Joe so-and-so to lunch or Sally so-and-so to lunch, and, I didn't get anything out of it.
So what do you tell a person who comes to you and tells you that?
I tell them that you didn't develop a relationship. No wonder you didn't get anything out of it. You probably spent the entire time talking about yourself, not learning anything about the client or the prospect's business, not understanding what they need, putting yourself in a position to help them. I think it starts with your initial meeting. Clients or prospects or referral sources even, when they meet you, they ask 3 questions, whether they do this consciously or subconsciously. And those questions are, do I like you? Can I trust you? And can you help me? And the reality is that everybody does this all the time. So in essence, everyday life is business development. So it's important to practice those skills. That third question is really the most important one. I know a lot of attorneys who are very popular people. A lot of people like them. A lot of people trust them. They get invited to sit on boards. They're very popular. They take people out all the time, but they're not developing any business. And they're not developing any business because they're not position themselves as an advisor, as a counselor, as someone who could help that client accomplish what they want to get done or solve a problem that they're facing.
but a lot of the elements that actually help you build relationships, they can be learned and they can be trained. So it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger you get and the better you get.
And one of the keys there is finding something that fits who you are. I think we find too many attorneys who they look at their colleagues and they see someone who goes to a lot of networking events or does something else, and they think, well, I should copy that method. When in reality, what you need to do is find out what works best for you. If you're not interested in networking, if you're uncomfortable in networking situations, it's going to take a lot of time to overcome that challenge of being comfortable in a networking situation. Find something that works for you.
I think the issue of comfort is actually quite important. During that conference in Washington, I was providing coaching sessions, and in the individual sessions, we had the topic from invisible to in demand. And the idea was for lawyers to bring a marketing challenge that they actually currently face, and we work on it for 45 minutes, and that's the coaching. I had two lawyers, one from Europe, one from South America, who immediately started crying in the coaching session. This marketing situation puts a lot of pressure also on lawyers, because for some these networking events, they constantly are out of their comfort zone and they're very uncomfortable. Even if they look at LinkedIn, they feel pressured into being one of these loudspeakers and putting a lot of this me conversation out there, but they're not really comfortable in doing that.
I once worked with a woman who was very shy. If you're in a networking situation, she'd be standing in the corner all by herself. And we were working on her business development in a way that she could develop relationships. So I started asking her about herself. Turns out that both of her parents were chefs. They were very good cooks, and she learned from them. She was an excellent cook. And I said, well, if you don't like these big situations, and you're a good cook, why don't you invite people over for dinner? Cook for them. Well, as it turns out, when she's cooking, she also transforms from this shy, retiring individual to a very loquacious and interesting individual who likes to talk about what she's cooking. Before long, she was holding dinner parties with, 8 or 10 couples, and people were demanding to come to these things because everyone was talking about how good the food was and how good the conversation was. And it really turned out to be a great business development mechanism for her.
I always tell people that there's 3 things that they need to consider when they build their marketing strategy across a marketing funnel. If you look at it on I know you, I consider you, and I work with you, I buy from you. So the first thing is that it's something that actually fits your client's behavior. The second important thing is that you pick tactics or marketing measures across the whole spectrum and not just in the lead generation stage. So you generate a lot of leads, but then nothing's happening with it. And the third part is actually do something that you like and that you're good at. So if you don't like networking and have these small talk kind of situations, then don't go to networking events. To do something else that will actually help you develop these kind of relationships. And there are other solutions for that, right?
Exactly. You have to do something that fits your personality, something you're comfortable about, something you want to do. Otherwise, you won't do it or you won't be good at it. You're looking for situations to put forward the best version of yourself. Well, and I even tell people who are comfortable doing it, if they're not in the right mood, don't go. It's because you won't do well.
So this is all related to the what we do. And I mean, that's obviously an important part, because a lot of law firms and lawyers, they ask themselves how they can approach clients and how they can find new channels to reach these clients. But if we are about to engage with a person or with a firm, I mean, there are obviously things that we can do to improve our chances to successfully build a relationship. And it always comes back to the trust building issue. And one of the biggest factors, I think, in terms of trust building is communications. And that, on the other hand, is a skill that we as lawyers are not really well trained in. So at least in Switzerland, in law school, you don't get any communications training. Even in law firms, when you start, it's not something that's on the radar. So it's basically something that you have to learn by yourself. And what I found is a really important part in terms of communications, not actually what you say, but it's the listening part that is important, because you should try to figure out what this potential client actually needs. What are their challenges? What is their market situation? What are they facing? And how do they operate? As experts, we do have the tendency to keep talking, and because that's the things we are comfortable with. And it can be a little bit uncomfortable leaving that space to a person in a conversation so that they can express themselves and things that you don't really know. You can't plan these conversations, right? You just need to be able to react to that. But this active listening is actually something that will give you the answers that you're looking for, in terms of then reacting to it and being that trusted advisor that you mentioned, and building these relationships.
I always tell people that I work with to, when they're in a conversation, to listen for the differences, because it does two things. Number one, it makes you focus on what the other person is saying rather than standing there or sitting there the whole time thinking about, okay, what great thing am I going to say in response? And secondly, and most importantly, the difference is that's where the opportunity lies. When someone says something that's out of the norm, that's the place to start asking questions. That's the opportunity to drill down and find out what the real issues are, where the real opportunities are that the person sitting across from the table has. If you don't listen for those, and if you don't jump on those when they appear, you're going to miss the opportunity. You're going to walk away from the conversation and say, well, that was great, but I didn't really learn anything.
Well, that from the lawyer's point of view, and from the client's point of view, you had a conversation that wasn't really useful, right? You will get a lot of talk that you could have read from the website or from the LinkedIn profile of the person, and that's not really something that your time is too valuable to do that. And
right. You know, I think attorneys tend to think that their subject matter expertise is the most important thing. And yes, it's important, but it's just, you know, that's the ticket of entry. You have to have that just to be involved. I like to ask people, you know, I'll name 5 law firms in the market, and I'll ask an attorney or a client, I'll say, you know, tell me what the difference is between these firms. And I get a blank stare. No one knows what the difference is. It's you know, all that subject matter expertise. I tell our attorneys, with all due respect, I could take be in the same elevator bank in our building and find an attorney in another firm who could probably do most everything the attorneys in our firm do. The difference is relationships and understanding what clients want and what they need. And being in that position to be a trusted advisor, you have to be a great listener. So, you know, while subject matter expertise is important, it's essential, but it also has to be linked to communication and communicated in the right way.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because things that we also hear a lot is the statement something like, okay, but if I do a good job and if I'm well known in the area and I have a certain reputation, I've done a couple of projects, I did good work, I don't need any business development. My business should develop itself, because that's all that's necessary, is that I'm good at what I do. But like you said, it's not only what you do, it's also how you get there, right? So every interaction with the clients, every email that you send out, every call that you have, whether you meet your deadlines or not, these kind of things, everything matters in terms of whether someone trusts you.
I'll give you a non-legal example of subject matter expertise and why you need more than that. So I tore my Achilles tendon about 10 years ago, and my doctor referred me to a surgeon. And I went to the surgeon, and, you know, the wall behind me has more personality than he did. But he was the best guy in our market to fix my Achilles tendon. So I talked to my doctor about it, and I said, you know, this guy is, you know, he has no bedside manner. And, you know, and my doctor said, you know, well, you know, you're not going out for beers with him. You're, you know, actually really not going to interact with him. He's just going to, while you're asleep, he's going to fix your Achilles tendon. So yeah, he had a lot of subject matter expertise, but he had no bedside manner. Well, attorneys don't have, you know, your client's not asleep when you're working for them. You're interacting with them every day. And all of those interactions, you know, they want someone who's easy to work with. They want someone who, you know, that they enjoy working with and that provides insights and additional value. They just don't want to be put to sleep and have something fixed.
But it's also a bit unfair to that doctor you mentioned, because people cannot see your wall, and I can tell you that it has a lot of character. There's about 150 marathon finisher medals there, so it's quite an impressive wall. But I get your point. When I give a workshop or a speech to a group, I like to do these little quizzes across the session just to keep people engaged, and we discuss things based on their answers. And one question that I regularly do is I put on a quote from a law firm website, and then afterwards I ask them from what website of which Swiss law firm is this quote. and I give them 5 answer options from the biggest 5 law firms in Switzerland. And obviously it's a guessing question. They cannot know that unless they quickly Google it. But I mean, the statement there is clear, right? Because they all communicate in the same way. It's like what you said before, the differentiation on that area, it's impossible because they all say the same on their websites, right? That's not what provides you the business in the end.
Oh, it's the relationship. It's how the skills, the subject matter expertise that you have line up with what the client wants or needs, and then the way you deliver it. And you have to be responsive. That's the key thing I hear from clients is that attorneys aren't responsive. They can't get an answer to an email or to a phone call. And I know attorneys are busy, particularly litigators. You're tied up in a deposition, you're tied up in trial, but you can find 5 seconds to send a note back saying, "Got your message. I'll call you, this evening, or I'll, get in touch with you later." That's all it requires is just being responsive and being attentive to the client's needs. It's a buyer's market. It's not the seller's market right now. Clients have lots of choices, and it is hard to differentiate between attorneys and between the firms. And the way you do that is through relationships.
All right, Bill, it's almost time. We promised we would keep this within 20 minutes. So people have now slowly arrived at their workplace or at home or finished their coffees or whatever they were doing within these 20 minutes. This was great. I think what I take with me today is that relationship building is really a skill. There are things that you can do to get better. There are things that you have to train and to learn, even if you focus on the things that you're good at or that you prefer to do. There's always things that can be improved. Another thing that is important is having some sort of self-awareness on how you perform. Reflect a little bit. Ask people how you actually did instead of just assuming that you're doing well. And that you really have to have a service mindset. Business development in the legal sector is not about actually selling. It's about helping others.
Well, I agree with all of those points, Toby. Exactly correct. And I'll add an additional one, which is authenticity, which I think is more important today than ever before. I'll just close with a story about an attorney I worked with who used to go to this coffee shop every day and struck up this friendship with a young barista. And he'd go in every day and she'd see him walk in the door and she knew what his favorite drink was and have it ready. And they'd just talk for a few minutes and enjoy a laugh. And this went on for months. Well, one day he walks in the door and she comes out from behind the counter and walks up to him and says, "There's someone here I want you to meet." So he takes him over to a table and the man stands up, turns out to be her father, who also turns out to be general counsel of a big tech company. They struck up a conversation, and based on the daughter's recommendation and his follow-up conversations, he eventually ended up getting a couple of big litigation matters because of his relationship with this barista. So business development happens everywhere all the time, and it's important to be focused on it in every interaction you have, because you never know who's out there and who they are and who they're going to turn out to be.
Well, I think that's the perfect story to end this first episode, our session together, Bill. Thank you very much. I enjoyed this conversation and I look forward to our next one. If you're thinking about giving this another shot and plan to come back for the next episode, we will be talking about practical tips on how to find out what clients need. That's it for today. For Bill Burns and myself, thank you very much for listening.